And welcome to our meeting. It's a pleasure to see you all. It's a bit like sort of coming to a party and you've lost your keys or something and you can't get in, but I think we've all managed to get in so far, which is great. In some ways, it's a bit of a follow-up from our online assembly when we said we'd try and arrange a sort of get together at some point. And also as a kind of new venture, really, trying to get our sort of Justice and Peace community together from time to time, to share, to pray, to be together, to focus on issues. So that's what we're trying to do this evening. And it's a first attempt, so I hope you get this. We're very lucky, very privileged. We're very happy, that's probably the better word, to have Bishop Kenny with us this evening. So I welcome him and welcome all of you who've come to share and participate this evening. I'd like to begin with a prayer, which if you've got to the end of Fratelli Tutti, there's two prayers at the end, very beautiful prayers. So I thought we'd start with the first one. It's a prayer to the Creator. Lord, Father of our human family, you created all human beings equal in dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit, and inspiring us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects, and shared dreams. Amen. What a beautiful prayer. So, as Janet said, the idea was to sort of get personal by asking various members of the commission to just share a little bit about themselves, what their interests are, how they came to be involved in Justice and Peace, what their particular passions are about it. So we look forward to that. And Bishop Kenny's gradually agreed to kick off. So over to you, Bishop Kenny.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back again. I'm sorry that I've missed so many meetings. It is just that I'm getting old and life doesn't seem to get any less. Anyway, to go to what I was asked to speak about, which was why did I get involved in Justice and Peace? And I can almost put a date on it. I can certainly put a region on it. It was the autumn of 1969. I'd been ordained in 1969 and was sent to Maastricht in Holland to learn German and Swedish. I'd learnt neither of them there, but it was a fascinating time to be in Holland. And I used to, at weekends, help a priest who was English but looked after the Portuguese guest workers in the east of Belgium, in the area around Liège. They were working in the mines, which were still open then. Those people, except for after the fall of communism in Albania, I have never seen such poverty in Europe as was among those people. And the two of us used to, from a Friday night until Sunday night, used to celebrate 14 masses. And I speak no Portuguese. I used to say mass in Latin. He used to hear confessions, and we managed to get through among these very poor people. But on Saturday evening, we were always forced, is the right word, to eat our supper with the local lord of the manor. And that was where I became, to use a word which we didn't use then, radicalized. Because while these people were living in utter poverty, his local parish priest lived in a house, we know because we used to stay there, where in the morning after sleeping there, you could wring water out of your sheets. Having that, and he would then at supper the night before boast about how the next day he was taking his private plane to go to Rome in order to be at the papal mass. And I suddenly realized, young as I was, I don't belong to his church. That's not what I had anything to do with. And so I, from that point onwards, became fascinated, interested, trying to do things to help the poor. And I've tried since then, I haven't always succeeded, to see everything that happens through that prism. What does this mean for the poor? One of the reasons I haven't been attending meetings is I've been drawn internationally into trying to do something about nuclear weapons and about disarmament. I'm afraid it takes an enormous amount of reading to even try to keep up to date, and that is what I'm doing at the moment. I've been involved most of my life in international work, and I can honestly say the present Justice and Peace Europe, I was created during the early part of this century, and various other things like that. Some people would say it's quite useless, you need practical work, but I've always found if I'm doing practical work, I'm always asking the question, why? And that means you get involved in politics and structure. When I'm in politics and structure, I want to get involved with ordinary people. I've had that tension all of my life. I still have it. But at the moment, as I say, I'm deeply involved in the nuclear disarmament and on trying to get rid of weapons in our world. At the moment, it seems an impossible task, but you just keep going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop William. Thank you very much indeed. I think I'm up next. I suppose it's gradually in the course of my life, I've become involved with justice and peace. I suppose it started in some ways when I was very young. I was interested in geography and history. I learned some languages, didn't speak them very well, but understood them quite well. And it sort of widened my sort of outlook of things and of the world. And I've always been interested in what's going on and politics and things like that. I suppose the first big thing, living a very sort of restricted life in junior seminary in North Staffordshire, we didn't have much contact with the outside world. But later on, I went to Rome, and again, being in a very international situation, at the heart of the church in one sense, where there were students from Africa and South America, Asia, gradual internationalization. When we became aware of the sort of the variety of the church and the different struggles that were going on at that time, this was in the late 60s, 70s, and the whole business about putting Vatican II, which we're still doing, into action, but that insight about the church and the world's relationship being very much interconnected. I suppose when I went to Coventry to be chaplain at the Polytechnic as well, that widened my view and met a wider range of people, young people, and also many European students who were coming in those days. It was a fantastic experience. They were very interesting. And then going to Shirley, to Our Lady of the Wayside, of course, I was thrown in at the deep end just before Father Omani died. And many of you will know his great work for justice and peace under many, many different ways. Again, like Bishop William, he was always asking questions, and he was always trying to get to the heart of issues like nuclear weapons, abortion, poverty, and trying to see how the gospel and how the church's teaching speaks about that. And he took a very academic view of it. Very, very intelligent, clever man. But also in the parish, reaching out to the poor, starting off in Calcutta, and then through medical aid mainly to Africa and many places, practical aid, not just money, but actual things we collected and sent and bought. But just an amazing person, really, who really pioneered a lot of sort of work, you might say, in the Catholic Church anyway, in a very practical way in that parish. And that work still carries on. And also amnesty as well, freedom for prisoners. He was also very involved with this sort of Jewish people trying to leave Russia at that time. So that was and I had to sort of, with the parish, take that up and carry it on. Of course, the world changed a bit, but we still managed to have that focus in our parish life, and we formed the trust, which is still going and still making, supporting mainly missionary, really, activities in different countries, because there's a connection I think we have with missionaries. And then I came to Shirley, and again I was lucky enough to come to another parish which had a great interest and connection with justice and peace work and CAFOD through Brian Davis, of course. And this parish too continues to have that as part of its makeup. I think parishes all have different vocations, and some parishes have a vocation to witness justice and peace and work for it. So that's been really my journey. Nothing very spectacular, but just a gradual development, and that work has been part of my ministry as a priest and working with the people, and just seeing, you know, how the gospel, justice and peace, to me is integral to the gospel. How you can talk about the gospel, the Lord's teaching, without being concerned about the poor, those who are not free, those who are oppressed. I think that just seems to be, and I can't see how so many people can't see it in our church, but there we are. Or don't seem to see about it. I've been involved with the Justice and Peace Commission. I was trying to work out how long. It's over 25 years. It's probably, I've got through three archbishops so far, so that's the way. But anyway, it's been part of my priestly ministry, and it's been good to be connected with so many people and the various activities over the years to try and encourage and support justice and peace work in our parish, to try and keep the flame alight anyway. Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce Phil. I think Phil will tell us about himself and his own interests and his own involvement for many years in justice and peace work. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Jerry. Right, I'm Phil. I can't see myself here. Can you see me on full screen or what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name's Phil Mayland. I live in Newcastle under Lyme, that's North Staffordshire, Holy Trinity Parish. And I'm a husband, a brother, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. I've got 3. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Phil.
Okay, I'll carry on. I qualified as a teacher in the mid-1960s. I married my wife, Lynn. She's been my wife now for 54 years. She's absolutely wonderful. We went to live and work in Zambia. About 2 years after Zambia became independent. Our first school was in Mankoya, 300 miles west of Lusaka, in what was then called Barotseland. It's the poorest part of Zambia, the western province. And we were there a couple of years, moved down to Sesheke on the Zambezi River. Sesheke is right opposite the Caprivi Strip, which is part of Namibia, but administered then by South Africa. And then after 7 years there, 5 years in Sesheke, 2 in Mankoya, we were moved to the eastern province, Patauki, which is 300 miles the other way from Lusaka to the east. And we were there for another 3 years. The reason I say all those things, because 7 years in the western province with no electricity, water, food supplies were not always reliable. It was interesting. But what was more interesting was the UDI, and our southern borders were Rhodesia. That was the time of UDI. There was the guerrilla war going on in Rhodesia. To the west of us in Angola, which wasn't too far from Sesheke, there were the guerrilla fighters going in there to try and overthrow the Portuguese administration in Angola. And then when we were moved to Patauki, we were 35 miles from the Mozambique border. And you had the same situation, guerrillas trying to overthrow the Portuguese administration in Mozambique. So the tensions around all that going on were obvious, and they sort of influenced me. One of the things that happened as well as teaching, I was seconded to the Electoral Commission to help administer elections in 1968, the parliamentary elections, then later on local government elections, registration of voters, and that meant the 3 different areas we lived in. I travelled to every single far corner of those districts. There were no roads. You know, I saw the villages, I saw the way people lived. Sometimes I spent nights with them, and you know, the happiness, the how people would live together, and yet in such poverty. I mean, I was taking, at times I had to take food supplies if the rains had failed. But, you know, there was a lot there that had a big impact on me. Another thing that happened, one other thing that Father Benignus, I wasn't a missionary out there, and I was, you know, trying to earn some money, but Father Benignus he gave me a copy of Vatican II, big, thick red book, and that fascinated. You know, I used to try and read it, and then, of course, Populorum Progressio was published. When we returned to this country, I got involved in a number of things. One was in the National Pastoral Congress in 1980. I was asked to be a delegate there on war and peace and nuclear weapons. We were some very, very strong arguments. And anyway, that's by the way. That was 1980. I was involved with anti-apartheid movement, Palestine, anti-racist and fascist movements, because National Front was making a mark during the 1980s. And then I was working now in a Catholic school. I did, you know, working in a school, there's a lot of a rhythm about schools, and there's various things like, you know, CAFOD fast days and so on. So there was a lot of work to be done in the school as well. When I retired, I became parish contact for CAFOD, a volunteer, and that's developed now. I do a lot of work with CAFOD, area coordinator, campaign coordinator for 5 deaneries in Staffordshire, Walsall, Wolverhampton, so on. Schools visitor, which is great fun. You get a lot of satisfaction visiting schools and delivering lessons and so on. One of the big things for me was going to Paris in 2015 with the CAFOD delegation. I was a last-minute replacement so a couple of people had dropped out. But I made some really good friends who are here this evening, a couple of them. And it was a great experience. That was. I was invited to join the commission. I think I'm the only one from the north of the diocese on the commission, but that doesn't matter. In the parish, we live simply parish now. And one final thing, I got involved with Bishop McGough asked me to go to a refugee forum a few years ago now. And we discovered that in Stoke-on-Trent, it's one of these dispersal cities. There are hundreds of asylum seekers. They're all refugees, but they're called asylum seekers. And then they become destitute because their claims have been turned down. So our parish and other parishes now support. We have food collections for clothing, anything at all that can help. The biggest organisation locally is called Asher, and we help there. That's become part of what I have to do as well. That's about it. Thank you. Hello, Janet, are you there? Oh, I've got to introduce Barbara. I beg your pardon. Barbara's following me. So, are you okay, Barbara? Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, pressing the wrong button to unmute myself. Good evening. I'm Barbara Nicholson. I've just spent my life doing administration work in various different places. And after I retired, I moved up to the West Midlands, which was about 11 years ago, and I now live in Lichfield. But I have always been interested and engaged in what you might, for want of a better word, good causes, starting from perhaps taking my pennies into school for the missions, shaking collection tins in the streets for various charities as a teenager. But it wasn't until I did my business diploma in about the 1960s, late 60s, that I did a business plan on waste disposal, better use of waste disposal. And that set me looking at the way we treat the earth, you know, and where we live, and how I lived, worked and affected the world around me. So I suppose you might say it's sort of I started looking at my carbon footprint, although nobody had ever heard that word in those days. And then in my last parish down in Buckinghamshire, bringing up my children, I became involved. I was on the local Christian Aid Committee, and we had a very active CAFOD group within the parish, which I was a member. And we placed almost as much emphasis on raising awareness of the issues behind the problems of this so-called third world as we did raising money. And again, this raised my awareness of the impact of my own personal actions on others, whether those others were in my local community or in the wider global community. And it made me realize that everybody is independent, everybody is interconnected. So with the publication of Laudato Si, it brought all my little musings over the years into place. And Pope Francis's words sort of resonated so much with my own thoughts. And with climate change, and anyone who knows me knows I bore people to death going on about climate change. I always manage to turn the conversation to it somehow. But I decided that, you know, it was no good just, so I personally had to do something. So I sort of joined the Justice and Peace to help me find a way forward in all this, to make my voice heard a little bit more loudly, perhaps. And this need to add my voice became even more personal and urgent for me as I watch my very young grandchildren grow. And I wonder what kind of a world have I helped fashion for their heritage. So anyway, that's just the brief summary of my little journey to where we are today. Thank you. So I'd now like to hand you over to Joanne O'Meara, the CAFOD representative on our committee, and who is the Community Participation Coordinator for CAFOD in our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, I'm one of them. I work with my colleague Sylvester, who's also in the Archdiocese of Birmingham as well, and some of you may have met him. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's a privilege to be with you all this evening, albeit virtually. Just a very brief overview of my own interest and background in justice and peace work. It stemmed when I was at university in Southampton as part of my undergraduate dissertation. I interviewed Bruce Kent at the time, and that sort of lit a sort of a flame inside of me. And from there, I became involved in local community projects in Southampton. I volunteered at a shelter for the homeless, and I then from university went to volunteer for a one-year programme for Catholic Charities Volunteer Corps based in St. Paul and Minneapolis for 1 year as an education and social service advocate at what is actually the largest day centre for people who are homeless in the US. And I never forget, for the first 3 months, in terms of my sort of job description or role, I sat and listened to people for 3 months, because the journey of learning from people and being with people wasn't just about doing for people, but it was about listening to them and walking with them. So that was a big lesson for me. Following that year, I returned to England and worked in Southampton with women and children in a very tough area in Southampton. And then following that, I kind of picked up and continued to work with the homeless. And so really throughout my life, I've sort of, I think, threaded through various experiences and an interest and passion for being with people, learning from people, and doing what I can to make a difference. And I suppose that's the same for all of us who are on this call. We're all here for a reason. Something's brought us here this evening. So that's just a little bit of my journey. And at this point, I'd like to welcome to each of you this evening Chris Perez, who is the newest member of the Commission, who I'd like to invite to share his journey with us.
Good evening, everyone. As Joanne's just said, I'm the baby of the Commission. I joined in November last year on the retirement of Anne Kelly, who many of you will know. My own journey in the area of social justice began in my sixth form days back at Bishop Hawthorne School in Coventry, where I had an inspirational teacher called Anne Farr, who got many of us involved in working with the poor. We did a big project with Coventry Church Housing Association, helping to move individuals and families out of their properties so that we could get them cleaned up and decorated. Since then, I've been involved with CAFOD now, I guess, for 10 years as a speaker, an activist. And I was fortunate enough to be with Phil in Paris in 2015 at COP21. We were there the day it was signed at Le Bourget, which was a great experience. We're hoping to go to Glasgow later this year for COP26. I'm an MP correspondent. I write regularly to my MP about local and national issues. Used to have a great relationship with Jim Cunningham, who was the Coventry MP for most of my lifetime in Coventry. And I was lucky enough to meet him on a number of occasions, both locally and in the House, including at a memorable CAFOD event in the speakers' rooms. I've attended major demonstrations like Drop the Debt in Birmingham back in the 1990s, and the big anti-Trident march that was on about 3 years ago in the centre of London. We got about 30,000 people there, but the press refused to report it because it wasn't really in the interest of the current government. I belong to my parish's Justice and Peace and Live Simply groups. That's St Thomas More in Coventry, and we're one of the early parishes to get the Live Simply award. I'm also a member of the Coventry Deanery Justice and Peace group. We've been working for a number of years to get the West Midland Pension Fund to divest in the companies that manufacture arms, and especially those who sell them into conflict zones like Saudi Arabia, that are causing so much grief to the people of Yemen. More recently, I got involved with Pax Christi, participating in activities locally, such as our silent vigils at Coventry Cathedral, which marked the Hiroshima and Nagasaki anniversaries, suitably socially distanced this summer, and a protest outside HSBC Bank because of the way they finance companies which either arm Israel or fund equipment like JCB do with their bulldozers to destroy Palestinian homes and olive tree plantations. I worked as a volunteer for the Coventry Winter Night Shelter for 6 years until we were forced to close this time last year with the virus. We haven't been able to open this year for obvious reasons, but thankfully the government has put a lot of people into hotels. So maybe one good thing has come out of the pandemic after all. And finally, I'm a trustee of a charity called Work Care Coventry and Warwickshire Limited. It's an ecumenical charity which puts chaplains into the workplace to act as a listening ear for staff who don't find it easy or even sometimes possible to talk to managers or colleagues about issues which are either work related or personal. We have also run job clubs in the past, a service that looks like it's going to be in high demand when the pandemic is over, and we might have 3 million or more unemployed. I think that's me for the moment, and there's no one else to hand you over to in terms of introductions, but I'm passing you to Phil, who is going to talk about the environmental policy.
Sorry, thank you, Chris. Sorry, I was muted for a moment there. Okay, this is our draft environmental policy. The Commission have been working on this, and we want to put it to you this evening. We started working on this policy over 2 years ago, and I want to acknowledge the Middlesbrough Diocese had produced a very nice shiny booklet policy. So we put together what we thought were pertinent ideas which could be disseminated throughout our diocese, or the Archdiocese. And for various reasons, we haven't been able to bring it forward until now. The Archbishop and trustees of the diocese are going to be meeting in April this year, and they are going to hopefully they're going to approve it or adopt it for dissemination throughout the Archdiocese. But what we want to do is consult with people like yourselves this evening. We're consulting with the youth service, we're consulting with schools, and to get in whatever people think and put it all together in that way. So we've had these few meetings. We begin the policy with some quotations we think are relevant. I just want to highlight one from Cardinal Vincent, where he says, making the encyclical, that's the Laudato Si encyclical, is the key. It's got to be known within and outside the church. So the question is, he says, how do we do that? By the way, this year has been designated as a special year for Laudato Si, marking its 5th anniversary from May 2020 last year until May 2021 this year is a special anniversary year. Pope Francis, in this encyclical, I'm sure you know this, calls for an ecological conversion, a change in lifestyle, a change in mindset, and we hope to facilitate that. So we split it up into 3 sections. First of all, first section about as a diocesan community and what should we do. There's a number of suggestions. I just want to highlight one, and that is the last one on that list, about parishes becoming Live Simply parishes. Archbishop Bernard, in his Advent pastoral letter 2 or 3 years ago even, did quite clearly and invite parishes to consider becoming Live Simply parishes. So I do hope parishes will look at that. The second section is on parishes and schools. What can we do? I want to acknowledge the work that's being done in schools. Primary schools and secondary schools are very often way ahead of what parishes are doing. There's a lot of good work on sustainable living, living in solidarity, living more simply. There's a lot of educational work, there's a lot of practical work. And so parishes can learn from schools. I want to again emphasize and make a plea for if your parish, can you become a Live Simply parish? And also, a fair trade parish. Why wouldn't you want to? I think that was an expression Archbishop Bernard used some time ago. Why wouldn't you want to become a fair trade parish? And you can put that into a Live Simply plan. The third section is for everyone. What can we do as individuals? What can I do to change my lifestyle? Again, a number of ideas there. We want people to look at those and see what can be done. I mentioned fair trade just now. One thing is that using the loaf principle we try to do when we're shopping for food or anything else really. The loaf, LOAF, is simple enough. To buy local. L is for local, O, organic, animal friendly, and fair trade. It's not a difficult thing to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into breakout rooms and small group discussions. We have a number of people have volunteered to be facilitators for the groups. Can I suggest you introduce yourselves in the group to the 3 or 4 people who are there, and then we're asking to discuss, come up, agree on at least one idea or suggestion that strikes you. And also, if you've got time, we've got about 10 minutes for this. Please, can you suggest any ways in which we can get this policy into the lifeblood of all our parishes? How is any bright ideas that way? So thank you very much, and have a good discussion. We didn't have enough time. There are some really positive contributions. What a big one, I think we all agree, was the language in this document needs to be made more urgent.
Yes.
That we the climate crisis has moved on. I mean, it has taken some time before we've presented this. So anyway, more urgent. We need to be able to sell this to schools and parishes as something. So if we use some of the language that Pope Francis uses in Laudato Si, that action is not an option. That people who in the pews at church need to know that action is part and parcel of our faith.
Yes.
It isn't an option.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another major point, I think, it's major to me, it's important, is the mining of minerals, elements, which are being used in electric cars, which are being used in mobile phones in various parts of the world. The Democratic Republic of Congo was mentioned. There are other parts of the world. These people are being exploited there, but also these elements are running out. The British mining companies are complicit in a lot of this work. And can I just add one other thing on that, is the government's environmental policy that they're supposed to be discussing in Parliament, it's got to be approved by Parliament, covers, or the amendments to this policy do cover a number of those points. And they've postponed the discussion again. So that's one for those of us who contact our members of Parliament. Thank you.
Father Jerry, I believe you looked after group 2.
Group 1, but anyway, yes. Well, we had a general discussion. What can we say? I think Father Ray said about focusing on the pandemic and how that makes us look at life differently. and can be a way in which reconsider, if you like, our way of life and what the sort of the experience of that has done to the way that we're living. I think a lot of people reported about their various CAFOD activities and Live Simply activities, and people agree that Living Simply, the program, is a good kind of focus that focuses on lifestyle and things like that, which are obviously quite integral to thinking about climate change and etc. I was just thinking about what Phil said, and I was just thinking about, this is not from that, but just how all these local government development plans, like in Rugby, they're going to build some huge business, place in the green fields with a car park for 1,000 cars. You think, well, it's all about unlimited growth, and you think, well, considering the climate emergency, that they shouldn't be thinking those kinds of things at all anymore, should they? It's just crazy. But anyway, I think those are the main things that we talked about. I think people generally were in favour of it as a practical policy, and the different levels, different areas touching the diocese, the parishes, and our own personal lives. It's trying to make it accessible to different people. And I agree with Phil that it probably needs re-looking at again, but there we are.
Barbara, you looked after group 3.
Yeah. Again, we talked, while they thought the document was good, there's no sense of urgency. A climate change emergency has been declared, but there's not one mention of it in the document. And there's no time frame there, sort of that. What is the diocese hoping to change its carbon footprint, or how, over the next 12 months, over the next 2 years, over the next 5 years? How are we going to implement, and when? So there needs to be a time frame. It shouldn't just be a policy, it should be a movement forward. And its sort of emphasis within it should also be on, there should perhaps be an emphasis within it on getting Laudato Si pushed in the parishes as well. And so I was also asked, is there a specific department within the Archbishop House that's going to look after it, or is there a go-to place for information? I think that just about covers everything we said. But it was agreed, it was a good document and it needs to be pushed into the parishes.
Chris, what did your group think?
We began by saying that we don't need all the bells and whistles. Let's be radical and get rid of fancy vestments and other things that aren't important in terms of the world today. We should make better use of the buildings. We need our church leaders in Birmingham to find a way to encourage all the parish priests to join in with this. Perhaps they can use a retreat day, either across the diocese or by deanery, to tell all the parish priests the bare bones of this policy and what Live Simply is about and climate change. Educate them so that they can work within their parishes. It was commented that it's great if you've got a supportive parish priest, but if you've got one that's not interested, you have little hope of doing anything.
That's right.
We need to look for the positives. The things that we are doing. We need to encourage and raise awareness. We need to make better use of our parish grounds as well as our parish buildings. And the final point when we got cut off was we need to involve more people. Many parishes have a handful of people who do everything. We've got to find a way to get more people involved. Very hard to do at this time of pandemic, but something we should aim for. My group.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Joanna?
Hello, yes. We didn't as such go back to the policy, but we had a broad discussion about what we'd like to see communicated and why. So some comments mention that, you know, that there are a lot of good things happening in parishes, but they probably need to be circulated more widely. You know, some parishes may not know about what other parishes are doing. There was a comment made that obviously some schools are very active, and that could be a real gift where they might be able to pass on the enthusiasm to parishes, and that might help spur things on. Somebody else mentioned that actually it would be good for the Commission to have a dialogue with the communications officer in the Archdiocese. And again, this is just about, you know, having this policy more broadly communicated. Looking at diocesan level, an important comment was made that if this policy, or when it's adopted, sorry, there needs to be someone to monitor it to make sure that it's carried out. And then looking at what the implications are for this policy. Somebody also mentioned the possibility of, you know, when parish visitations occur, could that be something that's you know, checked in on, or not checked in, but visited, you know, with the parish? How's it going? What's happening? So that it becomes part of a, you know, a normal parish life. Somebody also mentioned perhaps, you know, you might have some readings once a month that would link to Laudato Si. That might be a way to bring more parishioners on board, those that particularly may not know too much about Laudato Si. So that was the sort of summation of our group. So predominantly really focused on how we could communicate, but also how this will be monitored proactively at diocesan level.
Back to you, Father Jerry.
Oh, thanks very much for all those comments. They're all very useful, and particularly the last ones as well, about monitoring and all these things. At the moment, things are not sort of at the they haven't really reached the highest level in the diocese. So at the moment, there's it's trying to how to infiltrate the diocesan structures to actually get them to pay attention. I think Archbishop Bernard is always very, as you know, is always very positive and supportive, but we need to see how it's got to reach to, you know, properties and all these questions about monitoring, the very good ones about the visitation. Maybe parishes have to do a sort of annual, at least an annual financial statement. Maybe they should be asked to do some sort of statement about
the environment,
these matters, the environment. I mean, I'm part of a sort of group that from all the dioceses, bishops at the bishops' conferences, I think, trying to get its act together and on this. And there's people from different dioceses, and we're sharing about what different dioceses are doing. So some have made a lot of some progress, and some haven't started yet, and some are thinking about it. But for example, Salford Diocese is taking this very seriously. They've appointed an environmental manager as a diocesan officer to sort of look after this work. They've appointed a couple of researchers to try and look at the carbon footprint of the diocese. So somebody mentioned, so they're going to go through all the parishes, all the buildings, everything, and try and get some data. And that hopefully maybe all of us can sort of piggyback on top of that. We won't have to do everything ourselves, but all these initiatives in the other dioceses can be shared, and hopefully that will give us more knowledge and perhaps more confidence to go forward. So we're started, but we're sort of trying to get running at the moment. But there is stuff going on, and hopefully you can learn from each other, and that should make the journey a bit easier. If all the dioceses share what they're doing and policies, courses of action, you know, things like that would be really, really helpful. So I'm hopeful about that will encourage us to go forward. But we also need somebody in the diocese who's actually, you know, taking a lead role in this. You know, I'm not volunteering for the job.
Well done, Jerry.
Don't know if you've seen the chat, Barbara, but in the chat room, that it's been suggested that you use the diocesan newsletters to share commission activities and policies.
Yeah, well, they are. I mean, to do with them, they are very helpful, aren't they, about things? So they are helpful. But yes, I mean, it is about communication. As somebody talked about in one parish where they have, you know, a sort of little bulletin about living simply. Well, we've been doing that for years in our parish as well. So we're just sharing tips and, you know, encouraging things about what you can do about climate, the environment. But I think it does need to be, it needs a bigger kind of profile.
Can I contribute here, please, Janet? Jerry?
Yes.
Thanks. Just one thing I didn't mention when I introduced this is that in Birmingham Archdiocese, we have the highest number of parishes that have been awarded the Live Simply Parish Award. There are 12 parishes at the moment, plus Newman University. That's 13. There are a number of other parishes, I don't know exactly how many, who are working towards becoming a Live Simply parish. And becoming a Live Simply parish, those of us who've done this already, Brian is the first one who's done this, I think, knows it's a really good vehicle for parishes to come together. They know their own situation. They can make their own plans. And this is why I keep mentioning a Live Simply parish. But because we have more parishes than any other diocese, you know, maybe other dioceses will be saying things like, well, let's look what Birmingham are doing and then we will follow them. It's no good sitting back, that we have not got time. I did mention my introduction for myself. I have 3 great grandchildren, and I seriously, their lives, what sort of world are we leaving? This is what Pope Francis asked us. What sort of world are we leaving for the next generations? I mean, I know I'm not the only one, but I think we have to take action, and we have to be strong about taking this action, whatever that actions are, of getting more and more people involved. Thank you.
I hope nobody minds if I just come in here.
You're the person.
Yeah. Yeah. My name is Faye Forsey, and I'm one of the 2 communication officers for the Archdiocese of Birmingham. We are in regular contact with Janet, and we do, and Joanne at CAFOD as well, and we do a lot of supportive work in terms of sharing messages and doing what we can on our website, our social media channels, etc., to get messages, you know, that you want getting out. I mean, the reason that I've sat in on this meeting tonight is obviously, you know, the fact that the Commission is working towards a diocesan policy, which will need to be communicated to all of our audiences in due course. There's been some great feedback tonight from people who, you know, looked at the policy to date, but I think there is quite a bit more work that needs to be done on the policy before it goes before the Archbishop and the trustees in April. I think it would be very important for the Commission to have somebody at, I don't know whether it's diocesan management level or it will be one of the bishops, or, you know, that there needs to be somebody in the hierarchy really that is kind of the lead voice, if you like, that works with the Commission, that pushes this, because this is something that will obviously need the involvement of all the parishes and all the schools. You know, there does need to be a sense of urgency to get things doing, an action plan of achievable goals in the next 2 to 3, 4 years. But it does need the support of somebody at the top, basically, to be able to push this forward. So, you know, please be reassured that obviously the diocesan communications team is there and will obviously help and support in whatever way we can. But I think that the plan as it stands at the moment does need some work, and obviously the feedback that myself and colleague Caroline have got, I'll feed that back through to Janet, as I'm sure the feedback from all the other breakout rooms will go back to the Commission to be discussed and thrashed out a bit further.
Thanks, Faye.
Father, did you want to answer anything from anything in the chat room before we finish?
Some little notes of it, so I'm obviously there's lots of things there to think about. But it's just good to have, you know, more people thinking about it and talking about it than just the Commission ourselves. So the one problem is it's a very isolated business at the moment, and people said we need to get it further into the thinking of the diocese, and particularly, you know, the people who are well, not just the parishes, but the diocesan administration as well. We'll try and work. I've been in touch with the youth service and the school chaplains, and they were quite keen. Obviously, I think one of the things the Archbishop said was to try, obviously the young people would have a great interest in this, and we need to sort of link up with that and use that to create momentum. You know, if they get keen about it, you know, their energy and their vision would be very helpful. But as somebody said, it's enormous diocese. There's 220 parishes, you know.
Excuse me, Jerry. Brian.
Father Jerry, you've got Brian is waiting to talk to you.
Sorry, yeah.
Brian.
Which Brian?
Brian asked him, but
okay, sorry, I didn't realise I was being invited there. But basically, I just wanted to say that this environmental policy could be tidied up a bit, and people have made some suggestions. But at the end of the day, I think that however incomplete it is, we need to get it implemented as quickly as possible. And I would urge the Commission to bring it to a conclusion very, very rapidly.
Thank you, Brian. But it's the whole question of what does a policy look like, you know, so, you know.
Father Jerry, Bishop William would like to speak.
Of course. Yes, please.
Thank you very much indeed. This has been fascinating. First, just to answer one or two of the questions, the go-to group on these questions, as at least in the discussions I've taken part in, is the Justice and Peace Commission. The Commission is the go-to group at the moment, and that is where the Archbishop sends things. If you don't want to do that, or if we don't want to do that, then we need to hear very, very quickly, because there's got to find some alternative. The second thing is, I am very aware of the problems which if you don't have a cooperative parish priest. But who has said that the parish priest has to decide everything? Sorry, Jerry, but who has said that? There is nothing to stop a group functioning within a parish without the parish priest's approval. We happen to believe that you have a right to gather in this country, thank God. You don't have to have somebody's permission. It's not as easy. It will make for difficulties. And don't think that just because you're not getting to everybody, it's still worth getting to somebody. And you will all have contacts. Much of the contact these days can go out electronically, which means the cost is very, very small, if any whatsoever. And that needs to happen. The diocese as such has done a certain amount of work. I don't sit on the thing, but I think Jerry does. There's talk about disinvestment from fossil fuels. There has been a transfer to green energy. There are concrete things going on, even at the diocesan level. Faye has already answered all the questions about communication. As I can only say that I find the communications department very easy to work with, and I am sure that that will continue. Just one comment, the Bishops' Conference has done an enormous amount of work on this, thanks to John Arnold in Salford. and he is leading that. There is no great opposition in the Bishops' Conference to these things. It's going forward. Salford happens to be in the very fortunate position that it's financially better off than most of us, and therefore can begin to employ people, which some of us are not in that happy position. But anyway, these are things to be discussed. But I would agree fully with the idea, let's get this policy out, let's get it happening. If it's not perfect, okay, we can adjust that later on. There can be amendments, there can be things changed, but we definitely need something to happen now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent.
Right. Anything else? Thank you, Bishop William, for that.
I believe you're going to finish with a prayer, Father.
Janet?
Sorry?
Janet,
Yeah.
can I come back in, please? Can I suggest that the breakout room discussion I thought was very useful, but there may be participants here who feel that you haven't had chance to say everything you wanted to say. So I would like to invite you to send any comments, send those out to the Commission, and the Commission are going to carry on. We're going to meet again. We're going to look at all these proposals or suggestions and try to improve. This is the purpose of this, to try to improve the policy. And I would want to, I hope we can meet fairly soon to do precisely that. So if you feel you've still got something to contribute, please do so by emailing the Birmingham Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
I was going to suggest that as well.
Okay, yeah.
So just before the prayer, if you'd like to, just remind people that we're going to try and hold these every couple of months. But our next one is our Lenten Retreat, which is on the 13th of March. And then the next forum after that will be on Tuesday, the 11th of May. So if you feel that we need it more often, please let us know.
So Janet we've had some details about the retreat day, but they'll be on that day. It'd be online, obviously. We draw things to a conclusion now, okay?
Yeah, please, Matt.
Thank you all for accepting the invitation and coming together this evening. It's been very, very helpful and very enlivening, and I hope you find it helpful as well. At least it keeps us thinking about many things, but about climate change, the climate emergency, and also about the work of justice and peace. And it's always inspiring to meet other people who are trying to do the same things as we are, and to hear those stories about people's interest for many, many years and how they kept on at it. I think justice and peace is one of the things you've got to keep on at, as we all know. So thank you very much, and may the Lord sustain us and help us to go forward. And again, let's hope we can get some more progress on the climate change. So we're going to end with prayer, and again it's from the Fratelli Tutti. This is another prayer, which is an ecumenical Christian prayer. So let's just pause for a moment. O God, Trinity of love, from the profound communion of your divine life, pour out upon us a torrent of fraternal love. Grant us the love reflected in the actions of Jesus, in his family of Nazareth, and in the early Christian community. Grant that we Christians may live the gospel, discovering Christ in every human being, recognizing him crucified in the abandoned and forgotten of our world, and risen in each brother or sister who makes a new start. Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty, reflected in all the peoples of the earth, so that we may discover anew that all are important and all are necessary, the different faces of one humanity that God so loves. Amen.
Amen.
May Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit come down upon us and remain with us this night and always. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks again, every much.